In this video lecture, we'll recap the person class we've built so far and go over how to extend it to incorporate more instance variables. Okay, let's get started. So if you recall from when we first started talking about building up our person class from scratch, we said this would be the incremental development roadmap we'd follow. Starting from an empty new Java class, we've built a new person class up in stages as shown here. First, we added a starting pseudocode outline, then we added one instance variable, then full and default constructors, then two string and print methods, then an accessor and mutator pair, and most recently an equals method. At every step of the way, we've saved a snapshot of the most recent working changes, and so now we find ourselves at this point, person phase 7.java, although of course the latest person.java remains our live development version. What I've tried to introduce you to in this progression is the idea of steady, systematic, incremental development. We got something simple to work first, then kept adding to it. Now we're going to show you how easy it will be to extend our starting framework to all the other instance variables needed. Let's quantify the current state of our starting person class. So far we have the following. One instance variable only, first name. Two constructors, one default constructor with an automatic default, and one full constructor allowing us to specify an initial value. Three display methods, one toString for a single line output string, and two overloaded print methods for multi-line labeled format. For that one instance variable, we have one accessor and mutator pair, plus an overloaded prompting mutator which prompts the user for data. We have an equals method to test for instance variable equality. And finally, we have some starting unit test code for all the above methods. So looking at the cleaned up person phase 7.java you'll find online, the grand total so far is a whopping 151 lines of code, which does include comments and whitespace. So about now you're probably thinking, geez, that's a lot of overhead to service the needs of one piece of stinking data, isn't it? Well, yeah, it probably is. But now that we have the basic code framework in place for one instance variable, we're going to see how easy it will be to extend the class to handle all the other needed instance variables in the API. In fact, lots of the needed additions are simply going to be lots of copy and paste cloning of existing methods. Here's the basic checklist we'll use to extend our class, assuming we have everything in place to handle one instance variable. Now we need to declare any new added instance variables. We need to update our constructors and add any new overloaded ones that we might want. For every instance variable we add, we need to add one new accessor and mutator pair, as well as an additional overloaded prompting mutator. We need to add all new instance variables to our toString method in comma-separated format, and we need to add additional lines to our print method. Finally, we need to add additional check conditions to our equals method. All these methods taken together can be viewed as the basic infrastructure or plumbing of a new class. You might also hear this basic stuff referred to as the scaffolding of a new class. Here's a visual look at what we're talking about. So far we've created exactly one instance variable, this first one, the string first name. To go along with it, we've created these first two constructors, the default and full constructors, all these yellow display methods, these first three accessors and mutators in green for first name, and this equals method. That's it. Now, with the pattern in place, we're going to flesh out our person class, no pun intended. We're going to add all the remaining instance variables. We're going to update these first two constructors and add this third one. We'll update these display methods. We'll add accessors and mutators for every new instance variable, and we'll update this equals method. So in our next development pass, we'll finish putting into place about 75% of this new person class. In fact, in this week's program assignment, you'll be doing the same kind of thing for the class you'll be implementing from scratch. What we won't do, for now, is implement these final derived data accessors in purple, nor these class-specific utility methods in light brown. We'll leave those for next week's lecture materials and the second iteration of the new class you'll be building. Again, incremental, iterative development and divide and conquer. As we've said before, Java classes are the bundling of some small handful of data together with a whole bunch of methods that service that data, and we see that here. Here's a slightly more detailed checklist of the changes we'll be making to our person class. For our instance variables, we'll need 5 more variable declarations, each simply being a one-liner. For the default constructor, we need to initialize 5 more default values. For our full constructor, we need to add 5 more inputs to the argument list, then transfer those 5 specific input values to their instance variables. In our toString method, we need to add 5 more instance variables to our output string in CSV or comma-separated value format. In our print method, we need to add 5 more print statements and perhaps tweak the tabbing format a little also. For certain numerical values, we might need to introduce some format specifiers as well. For each of our 5 added instance variables, we'll also need to add 1 accessor, 1 standard mutator, and 1 prompting mutator. For our equals method, we'll need to add 5 more logical comparisons, all strung together into one compound statement with AND operators. Finally, we'll need some additional unit test code, but perhaps not as much as you might think. Remember, we have a lot of what we need in place already. If we add any new overloaded constructor forms, we'll need to test those also. Mostly, we'll just need to add test code for all our new accessors and mutators only. The test code for our display methods and equals should all remain unchanged. Also, to make life easier, recognize that we don't need to test all our methods on every object that we create. Once we've created new objects with each of the constructors and displayed it successfully, we can just pick one object and apply all the methods to it for testing purposes, as we've already done. You'll find all the above changes made and commented in personphase8.java, which I encourage you to review in detail, but there's one more little nuance we need to cover first. First off, we said as a general good coding convention and as a coding standard for this course, we would always provide at a minimum both a default and a full constructor. Any other overloaded constructors beyond those are at the discretion of the designer. But often we'll find there may be alternate useful ways to expedite creating new objects. For instance, take a look at this example on the right. We know we can make new person objects very easily by using the default constructor and relying upon the defaults, or we can reclaim full control by using the full constructor and setting all our own values, but that's more work. Suppose we wanted a nice middle ground. Suppose we wanted to set up a new person object by explicitly specifying a first and last name, but beyond that, all the default values are okay by us. We still need starting values for all the other instance variables, so what we can do is use the this keyword again, except this time as a method call. When used in this way, this simply represents a call to the default constructor, which in turn explicitly initializes all the instance variables. Then we simply update only these 2 values which differ from their defaults. The advantage of doing it this way is that now we only need to maintain our default values in one place, the default constructor. In programming, we never want to repeat the same instructions if we can help it. The only catch here is that this must be the first executable statement in this constructor. I'll be looking for you to do things this way when you set up some alternate constructors in your program. Don't repeat any default values in here. Understanding how this file is structured and creating is vital to understanding classes. To finish up, please view the demo video for personphase8.java, where we'll show how this person class gets built out. Understand what's happening in this file, because you'll be doing the same thing for yourself this week. There will also be some demonstration of how the test code interacts with all the methods so far in the person class. Okay then, with what we've seen and done so far, you should have all you need to undertake this week's program assignment to begin building your own class.